Well, hello and welcome to another fantastic edition of the Llama Commerce Show. I'm your host, Brett Curry, lead strategist here at Classy Llama, and I am absolutely jazzed, stoked, excited about today's episode. And we've got a fantastic guest. I would argue that he is the most frequent guest on all e-commerce podcasts. This guy makes the rounds.
Really?
I think so. I think our guest,
one of them, but yeah, maybe I've been on that one a lot. So
no, I listen to e-commerce podcasts a lot, because I'm in the business. Obviously, I hear this guy all the time. But our guest is Drew Sanocki, and funny. Drew has made a name for himself. He started and ran a very successful e-commerce store. Started back in the early 2000s called Design Public. We'll hear about that in just a minute. Now he runs his own blog and does consulting. And you've got to check out nerdmarketing.com. So nerdmarketing.com. And so without further ado, I'd like to welcome Mr. Drew Sanocki. Drew, how's it going, man?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good. So would you agree that you were the most prolific guest co-host?
I mean, I think of like Ezra Firestone, who every time I open Facebook, he's like in my feed 20 times. So I would say Ezra is probably above me.
Ezra may have you beat by a little bit. He's on this show a lot. We love Ezra. He's a good guy. And actually, I think that's how we first met, was at an Ezra Firestone event.
That's right.
In Orlando. That's how we first met each other. So Drew, I love our topic today. We're talking about how to stop focusing on the wrong customer. And I know that I run into this all the time. You do as well, where merchants don't really know who they're focusing on, or if they are focusing on the wrong customer, they don't realize it. And so we're going to talk about how to overcome that, where to focus your energies and your intentions and your marketing. So I'm really excited about the conversation. If you wouldn't mind, give the folks just a quick background for the few people, the handful of people that don't already know you. Give just a brief background of what you did, how you got into the e-commerce business, and what you're doing now.
For the one or two people out there who don't know me.
Yes.
Even if they've heard me on other podcasts, I don't think I've ever done a visual one. So now they see me.
Yeah. They're like, this is a handsome dude.
They thought it was like a Harrison Ford guy. It's just this guy. Yeah. So my name is Drew Sanocki, and I started designpublic.com. It was, I think, one of the first dropship retailers back in 2002. We dropshipped home design products and grew that 100% dropship, bootstrap company, grew that through 2011, sold it to a private equity fund. And I kind of joined that side of things around then and became what's called an operational partner at two PE funds. Operational partner is like their operational bench. So if they're looking at a deal that is digital and has some e-commerce to it, I might get involved and do diligence on that deal and talk about how they might grow the company, what the opportunity is. And if the deal goes through, I may also take on an operational role at that company for a period of time. So most recent example, the firm I work with, Comvest, bought Karmaloop.com out of bankruptcy. Several years ago, it was a $100 million retailer, went bankrupt, and we own it now, and we're trying to get it profitable again.
Yeah, it's really cool. So Karmaloop, it's urban apparel, correct? That's the
streetwear.
Streetwear.
Not wearing here. I am the oldest guy. I'm like the oldest guy at the company. I sit at the conference room table, and it's like a bunch of Ollie G's around the table.
Yeah. Like, who's this guy?
Yeah.
That's awesome. But I love the fact that you were in e-commerce really in the beginning, and you're one of the rare true success stories. Like, you built Design Public into this awesome business. It was acquired. So you've got experience on the building, the marketing, the how do we grow our customers, all the way through to the sale and all that. So really just a wealth of experience and knowledge, and most people don't have. Most people in the industry don't have your experience, which is cool. So
thank you.
So let's talk about how to stop focusing on the wrong customers, how to focus our energies and our efforts on developing and growing the right customers, because I think that's one of the most important, if not the most important, elements of e-commerce is, are we attracting the right people? Are we selling the right people? Are we doing everything we can to grow the right customers? Because I'm sure when you go to sell your e-commerce business, so whether you're wanting to build it and keep it, or whether you're trying to build it and sell it, having good customers, loyal, repeat customers, I mean, that's the most valuable part of the business, right?
I think it's the number one thing you have to do to grow your business. And I think the evidence backs me up on that. Other than maybe year one, when your focus is like traction and you're just concerned with getting people in the door, buying. I think as soon as you have been in business long enough to have repeat customers, it's got to be one of your priorities. And it's largely, I mean, you know, e-commerce as well as I do. E-commerce, so much has been written about how hard it is, right? Andy Dunn, the Bonobo CEO, has that article, "E-commerce is a bear."
I love it. It's a great article.
Great article. And Josh Hanna, partner at Matrix, venture capitalist, has another article that he published on Pando Daily called something like, "That's a nice little $30 million e-commerce company you have there. Call me when it scales," which is like,
yeah.
The joke being, anyone can grow an e-commerce company up to a certain amount. 30 million seems kind of high, but you know, it plateaus there. They don't scale. And that's what Dunn was talking about in his article. And it's because the cost of acquisition is so high that e-commerce companies start from zero every month. You know, unless you're fortunate enough to run a subscription company, like you got to acquire all your new customers every month. And if you look at where the profits are made, they're very rarely made on that first sale. You make profits on the second or third or fourth sale. So, you know, retention's got to be a focus.
Yeah.
And, you know, what I argue is something, it's not me. I mean, it actually dates back to the 50s to the catalog companies that started thinking this way, but it's the 80-20 rule. I mean, you've got good customers and bad customers. Good customers order several times. They have high AOVs. They don't complain. They don't return stuff. And bad customers order once and return. They take up all your customer service time. And, you know, I'm hoping everybody who's in e-commerce who's listening to this is like nodding. And so if you assume that they have a comparable cost of acquisition, growing your company is a heck of a lot easier if you focus on the big guy, you know, the better customers, what I call the whales, as opposed to the small customers, the minnows.
Yeah, yeah, and I've heard you say that not all customers are created equal, right? And that may at first make someone cringe, but I think it's totally true. Like, it doesn't mean that they're good or bad people necessarily. It means that some customers are a much better fit for you than others. Just like you said, some are going to buy again and again. Others are going to return and just cause headaches. So
right.
What I'd like to do now is how do we find and identify the right customer, and then how do we develop that? So I know one of the things that I hear a lot is as we start talking to merchants, most of them will readily admit they don't know their numbers like they should. They don't know their customer numbers like they should. So what are some ways, if you were consulting, I know you do it all the time, a store owner, on how to better understand their customer, how to identify the top tier or the whales, so to speak?
Yep.
What are some metrics you would tell them to look at, and how would you kind of have them get started?
Well, fine. You know, there's a quick way to kind of prove this point out to you. And it's if you go into your Google Analytics account, just create a new segment. And I've got a little demo on my blog on how to do this, but you know, create a new segment and make that segment your whale segment. So it's going to represent your best customers. And maybe, you know, it's really different for every business, but set that segment to everybody who's purchased at something like, you know, twice your average order size. So 2x the AOV. And then just see how that stacks up to the rest of your traffic. And it's not uncommon to see that, you know, this was like 2% of your total sessions on your website, and it contributed 50% of your revenue for any time period. So, I mean, that's just a quick thing you can do if you're curious to kind of prove the point out. And then if you really want to dig into the metrics, I fall back on like what the catalog industry sort of pioneered in the 60s. And it's this 3 metrics, RFM. R is recency, so how recently a customer's been on your site. F is frequency, so how many times that customer's purchased from you. And M is the monetary value, or the total amount that customer has purchased from you. And using only those three, you really can score all your customers, get a good idea of who the bad customers are, who the good customers are. And, intuitively, like if a customer was on my site more recent, the guy who was on my site yesterday versus the woman who was on my site 2 years ago, the guy who was on the site yesterday is probably going to be a better customer going forward. The guy who's ordered 5 times versus the guy who's ordered 1 time, like I would take that 5 times buyer as more indicative of a better buyer going forward. And then the guy who's purchased more in the past, the total monetary value is usually a better customer going forward than the person who's, purchased a lower amount. So you take those 3 metrics, anybody can dig them out of you can dig them out of Google Analytics, you can dig them out of like your transaction table and just start there. Start by ranking your customers and trying to see like what the commonalities of the good ones are versus the bad ones.
And so what would some of those commonalities, what would you be looking for? So as you rank these good customers, what are you looking for specifically?
Yeah, I find that there are two things that they usually have in common. The first thing you want to look at usually is acquisition channel. You'll find that your best customers are acquired disproportionately through certain channels. And even within channels, like say it's AdWords, certain keyword groups or ad groups are more likely than others to drive good customers. And it's never black and white. It's never like 100% of my good customers come from Facebook and 100% of the bad ones come from AdWords. Right, it's always like, 21% here versus 18% there. But you find that certain ad groups, certain ads, certain ad copy and visuals, all are much more likely to drive a better customer with a higher LTV. And so the question there becomes like, if you've got $1 to spend on marketing, where are you going to spend it? Spend it on those acquisition campaigns that drive the good customer. And then the second thing I like to check is more of a merchandising thing. And it's usually the product or the product category that's first purchased does tend to correlate with good or bad customers. So I talk about bonobos a lot just because I know some of their data, but the customer that goes into bonobos and buys, the guy who buys the swimsuit as the first product purchased is that say it's a $40 product, has a much lower LTV over time, customer lifetime value. So the total profits you make off that customer has a much lower one than the guy who goes in and buys a suit for a couple $1,000. And it intuitively makes sense, but it's borne out in the data that they compare the customers who enter buying swimsuits versus the customers who enter buying suits and all their subsequent purchases, and it's night and day. So also, in addition to that acquisition channel, look at initial product and initial category purchased.
Yeah, I love that. So let's talk about acquisition channel to begin with. And what I love about what you just said, and this is something we try to do, and this is one of those aha moments where merchants say, "Oh man, I wasn't doing that, and I should be doing that."
Right.
Where they look at channels just in aggregate. So organic search, oh look at that, this is the average order value, and if they can calculate it, lifetime value for someone that buys there, or AdWords, let's lump all of that together, and certainly that's better than nothing. But if you can drill down more specifically to a campaign or an ad group, or if you're looking at Facebook, what was our initial hook and our initial offer in that campaign? What did that do? What kind of initial AOV, average order value, did that create? And then what did that do lifetime? So I love that.
Yeah, I think, when you're first starting out, the calculation's easy. It's like, did I make money or lose money on the first sale? And you basically can stack up that key equation in e-commerce, which is lifetime value has to be bigger than customer acquisition cost. So you stack up how much did it cost to acquire this customer from this one marketing campaign or this one ad versus how much did I make off that initial purchase. But you'll find if you've been in business for a while, the more you can track the total lifetime value over years back to that initial campaign, the better. You're going to have a leg up on your competitors if you can do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think, and I also love the fact that you look at the first product purchased what does that tell you about the customer long term? Whether that's just a good indication of what the customer is like, or whether that purchase kind of trained someone to buy at a certain level. Then you probably a couple of ways you could look at that. But how should that influence? So to go back to the Bonobos example of, hey, guys that buy the suit versus guys that buy the swimming suit, totally different picture. How should that, then knowing that data, how should that impact the way you do?
Yeah, what do you do with that information? Well, you find typically that a lot of merchandisers will put the highest converting product on the homepage. In Bonobo's case, maybe they put the swimsuits up because volume-wise, it looks like people are buying more swimsuits. Yeah, everybody's buying them. Put them up there. But what they don't realize is that they don't see the entire life cycle of that product. They don't realize that maybe a lot of those customers are never coming back, or they are buying and returning the swimsuits. Instead, you want to, feature the suits, because you're bringing in these whales when you feature the suits. The actual volume will not be as high, but if you walk into a Bonobo store, the first thing you see are the suits, because they know that that's like they're trying to attract that buyer. So what I would do if I were running my own e-commerce shop is, you think about the kinds of customers that are created by these initial products, make sure they're worked into your homepage mix, and even do some, if you're getting into email automation, I think it's a great opportunity. The customers who buy those key products that create, higher lifetime customers, chase them with an email sequence that encourages more purchases, because that those are your high LTV customers. They're more apt to buy from you. They like you, upsell them, continue to upsell them over time.
Mm-hmm. So they buy this particular product, the suit or this bedroom set or whatever the case may be, and now I'm putting them in this certain segmentation, this certain list, and now I know they've got a higher likelihood of buying the next thing, and so I'm going to market to them a little bit differently after the fact.
And really, a quick back of the envelope, like a lot of this stuff can be done, with some serious data crunching in SQL, or it can be done back of the envelope really quick. And obviously, if you're one person running your own store, I'd opt for that. And a simple way to segment out your customers is just look at initial AOV. Like, how big was that initial order? Usually that correlates really well to how good that customer is going to be over time. So, divide your customers in half, the high AOV customers and the low AOV customers, and really just focus your offering in on the high AOV customers. Like, what makes these women or these men similar? Like, where are they coming from? What do they want from me? And what problem am I solving? Like, pick up the phone and call your highest AOV customers and talk to them and find out how you can improve your offering to suit them.
I love that idea. And, we encourage merchants to survey, to email out a survey or whatever. But I'd be really fascinated when you were at Design Public or now in your consulting role. Do you guys do that? Do you actually call customers and ask them questions? Because I think that's brilliant.
Yeah, we do. It's a great idea, and you learn so much, but there is that, like, you want that little nuance thing that you just know who you're talking to before you call them. So if you just say survey all your customers, what happens if you survey all the bad ones? You're going to get feedback on your offering that really won't improve your offering.
Yeah, right? Only call the best customers.
Kind of, or know that these customers were good and these are bad, and let's compare what they said. But if the number one question I ask is like, give me some names of your top customers. Give me your top 5 customer names. And I'm always surprised that nobody can ever answer that. But that's like, now at the companies I work on, like, we can answer that. We know the people's names. Like, we know what they want and who they are and why they buy from us. And you just get great insights from that. Like at Karmaloop, we know that these guys who buy streetwear, like, they want sneakers, like, they're sneakerheads, right? So, like, we got to blow out that category, because this category really attracts the whales.
Yeah, it's kind of like in the car business, and I've had conversations with my wife about this. I'll notice the wheels or tires on a car and say, "Man, that's so awesome."
Yeah.
He says, I didn't see the wheels." And so for some people, the way they dress, it all rolls around the shoe. The shoe makes or breaks the
right.
So that's cool. And how do you think that, so knowing your customer like that, calling them, having that name in mind, how does that influence what you guys do? Because I love the fact that you know that. How does that influence what you do? You said the sneakers, but anything else that influences, like from your language and in your marketing to?
Yeah, I mean, well, merchandise is sort of the obvious thing if they give you recommendations on what they'd like to see, but it's not always merchandise. It could be service too. You know, Zappos knew what their most popular or biggest customers wanted, and they changed their service offering to fit that, right? Like it might be as easy as a 1-800 number that you only reveal to your top customers if they value that sort of thing. You know, it could be a better service contract. It could be a better offering. It could be a better way to deliver the product. All that stuff goes into it, but you really don't know until you start talking to the customers.
That's true. That's true. And I like what you said, getting back to the metrics and how do we measure this and quantify this. You said something really great, I think, a minute ago, where, kind of a quick back of the napkin or down and dirty way of calculating is just looking at AOV, high AOV versus low AOV and starting there. But what would you recommend for calculating lifetime value? So for a merchant to really take their business to the next level and start to scale, I think they need to know that, right? They need to know, what is my lifetime value? How do you begin calculating that, or how do you begin to take steps towards calculating that? I know there's probably several directions we could go there, but any advice around measuring lifetime value?
Yeah, and that's my advice would be not to do it actually initially, because it is a cumbersome calculation. Kissmetrics has a great post. If you Google Kissmetrics lifetime value calculation, I mean, you'll see it's got like nominator, the denominator, and like all these fractions and like a derivative in there. Like it's not
breaking in the cold sweats because you're back in math class. Like,
yeah, it's not an easy calculation and it's not actionable. And I think it also is a little bit deceiving, because when people talk, oh, my lifetime value is 100. What it does is it's a lazy calculation in that you actually have several customer segments with different LTVs. And these guys might be, there might be 1,000, and these guys, their LTV might be $1. And until you break it down by segment,
them all the same.
Yeah, you don't want to treat them all as if they're 100, right? Like that's the issue. But what do you replace it with? And I argue that there's this thing called the customer life cycle, which is a little bit easier to get your head around. And it means that customers have a typical way of interacting with your business over time. And take me and bonobos. Like when I first discovered the brand, it fit really well. I bought a lot of bonobos. I bought more over time, up to maybe a peak, and then it fell off. I burned out on bonobos. My wife called BS or whatever, and I just stopped.
Why don't you think bonobos on the credit card statement, Drew? What are you doing?
Yeah, so it ends up looking sort of like a bell curve, where you buy more over time and then you buy fewer items, and really. You'd be surprised at how, like, once you figure out what that standard life cycle looks like, lots of different, like it's not a law, but it's close to it. And it's a great way to approximate your business. And different buyers within your business might, like if you have, in our case at Design Public, like the kids and baby buyer that was buying for a nursery had a certain life cycle where their purchases would accelerate over 3 months and then decelerate over 3 months. And by 6 months, they were done buying from us, whereas the furniture buyer might have had a much longer life cycle that, if you were furnishing a living room, lasted over a long time. But I would say the first step is find that life cycle, and you can just do something as easily as export all your transactions and figure for everybody who's bought more than twice, like what was the average time between the first and second purchase? And retail wide, a good guess at that's like, say, 30 days. If somebody buys this coffee cup on day 1, 30 days later, they're going to buy another coffee cup or the plate or something that goes with it.
Hey,
and then you start.
I saw that Intelligentsia coffee cup. That's nice.
Yes, my Intelligentsia coffee cup. So maybe they buy the cup and 30 days later they buy the coffee or something. So that starts to give you an example of what the life cycle might look like. And then you use that to market. So money is made when people start deviating from the standard behavior. In other words, you don't have an infinite number of dollars to spend on marketing. You can't market to me all the time. So when's the most profitable time to market to me? It's when my behavior is deviating from the norm. If I go to your site and I'm buying a t-shirt every month on average, then all of a sudden I stop. It's been 30 days, 45 days, 50 days, and I haven't bought that t-shirt. Like, my behavior is deviating from the norm, and that's a great time to market to me.
Yeah, and I've heard you call that win-back campaigns, right?
Right.
In some cases. And so talk about that. How do you set those up? What kind of offers are you putting in these win-back campaigns? What does that look like?
Well, the classic win-back campaign is actually, so everybody knows these life cycles exist. They might not call them life cycles, but that there are defected customers, right? Like, there are customers out there who haven't bought from us in X amount of time. And then the question is like, well, what is that? And it really depends on your retailer. But, someone hasn't bought from my retailer in 5 years, I'm calling them defective. They're gone. In a win-back campaign, usually you do it around the holidays, and you go back to everybody who hasn't purchased from you in a year or two and say like, hey, come back and buy. I'm going to try to win you back. And usually I give you an offer. What I'm talking about is better than a win-back campaign. It's actually like an anti-defection campaign, because you want to predict that customer is going away. In the SaaS world, it's like, imagine you've got a customer who's got a monthly recurring subscription to MailChimp, and every month MailChimp is charging me. I want to predict when that customer is going to churn, when they're not going to buy from me anymore, right? So that's the anti-defection campaign. It's, I think, the most profitable campaign any retailer can do. And the way I would do it is just start thinking about this life cycle. And then every month, maybe if you figure out that 30 days is typical between purchases, I'm pulling a list every month of everybody who hasn't purchased in over 30 days, maybe 45 days. And I'm going to send them an offer to come back. I'm going to send them a 10% offer. Haven't heard from you in 40 days, come back. And really, like, you can do it manually. And then ultimately, when you get better at it, you can automate it using Klaviyo or MailChimp or something like that. But that's kind of the way I would approach it. Another best practice is typically to do what's called a discount ladder with your anti-defection campaign. So one mistake I see a lot of retailers making is they'll send out one like, let's have a sale. We'll send out 20% off to everybody right now. And the problem with that is that when you do a blanket promo like that, there are a certain percentage of your customers who were going to buy anyway. Like, they were literally on your site with their credit card out, and then they got the email from you that said save 20%. So there's a hidden cost there, it's called a subsidy cost, and you're giving away money when you wouldn't have to do it otherwise. So what I like to do is ladder my promos, and that's, if you haven't bought in 30 days, you get 10% off. If you haven't bought in 60 days, you might get 15% off. And if you haven't bought in 90 days, you get 20% off. And then you find that you're really increasing the amount of your promotion with the likelihood that the customer is not coming back. So it's a super, effective way of doing promotions.
Yeah, and I love that, because it all goes back to the recency idea, right, from the catalog days, where someone who's purchased pretty recently, they're much more likely to buy than someone who hasn't bought in 90 days or 6 months or a year or whatever. Right. Yeah, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, you don't want to send a promo out to me if I just bought from your site, last week.
Right.
And by the way, I say promos, but I know a lot of retailers are really sensitive to promotions. They don't want to go on promo. I use the term loosely. I mean, it can be any like added benefit or incentive you can employ to get a customer back, and maybe it's free shipping or free gift with purchase or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we kind of begin to wrap this up a little bit and tie up a few loose ends here, what are some of the mistakes that you see people make? So as we kind of drill into actionable bites or things just to avoid, what are some other mistakes you see people make? So as they're working on their marketing efforts, or they're working on their merchandising efforts, and I know we've touched on several of these, so this will be kind of part recap, part maybe hear a few things we didn't mention. What are some mistakes you see people make around acquisition or retention?
Yeah, I mean, for just broadly speaking, for newbies or for people who are just starting out, it's keep that golden equation in mind where your lifetime value has to be bigger than your cost per acquisition. So I just find people not paying attention to that. They are paying more money than they're making off their sale. So you don't have a business if that's the case. Your job when you just start out is to throw a bunch of stuff up against the wall and hope that you can find one marketing channel that you can scale up, right? And that's where lifetime value or just even profits off your initial order is more than what you're paying to drive someone to the site. And then I would keep in mind that money's made on the second and third purchase, not on the first purchase. And so, a second big mistake companies make is they don't employ email. So email and remarketing are the number 1 and 2 way to get someone back to your site. Email is probably a little bit better. And in that case, they opted in, the customer opted in to hear from you. But remarketing, if they didn't opt in to hear from you, you can still pull them back.
Yeah.
So use email and remarketing to pull people back and purchase, that second time. And that's where you're going to make your money.
And here's what's kind of interesting, Drew. I know you get called in to consult with a lot of different types of e-commerce companies. Some are very successful. Some are on the upward trajectory. Others are like the Karma Loop, where they're kind of trying to bring themselves out of bankruptcy. Those that are struggling that you come in and consult with, do you find a pattern where usually they're not doing email marketing correctly, they're not doing remarketing correctly, they're not segmenting their customers properly? Is that something you see often?
It's often it's the lack of customer analysis, like this whole good customers, bad customers thing. You don't realize when you run a promotion that you attract a very different kind of customer than if you sell at full price. And the businesses that are struggling have become addicted to promotions. Like they run a promotion, and yes, it juices revenue, but like we talked about acquisition earlier, like you're attracting bad customers. They're attracting a customer who only buys on promo, and a customer who you're training your customers to only buy on promo. So if you're promo every other day in your newsletter, then your customers are just going to sit back and wait for the next promotion. And you get this cycle where, it's like a heroin hit, and you spike up the revenue, but then it drops right down, and you got to do it again to spike revenue up. And it's just a vicious cycle that gets worse and worse. And so a lot of the companies that are struggling are at the bottom of that cycle. And it's really a long process of trying to attract a completely new cohort. And maybe they see a new site and they see a new offer, but you treat them differently. And you try to bring them back and try to get them to buy at full markup. So that, I would say, that's the biggest issue that most of these companies have.
Yeah, it's so insightful. And I remember several years ago, I heard a guy say one time, and I thought it was awesome, that the customers will behave the way you bring them in, or they'll behave the way you train them. So if you don't like the way your customers are responding or behaving or buying, it's your fault, right? I mean, that's the way you got to look at it, and that's kind of painful, but it's true, and it's the way you have to address it. So I love that. We'll kind of wrap things up with this quote, and then we'll talk about your awesome blog and how people can connect with Drew here in just a minute. But I think you were quoting somebody. I read a blog post that you wrote that said, "The best new customer is an existing customer." Right, and I love that. You can talk about that quote at all, and who actually said that first? I wonder.
I don't know where I used that quote, but I like the quote. I think I probably said it in response to people who are so fixated on I just need more traffic. I just need more traffic. And in the end, and it's sort of well, why do you need more traffic? It's because you want a profitable business. And if you're looking for profits, you're going to get it from your existing customers more likely than you are from new customers. So I think that's probably what I was getting at with that quote.
It's a great way to kind of shift that perspective. And I've always been in the marketing business and mainly the acquisition business, and I love it. But it kind of like you said, the promotional cycle can be like this drug, to the business owner. Sometimes new acquisition can be too, when there's so much more to be made if you also go after cultivating your best customers and getting them to buy again, and not treating customers the same, but identifying the whale versus the minnow, as you say, or the good customer versus the not so good customer, and treating them differently. That's
I don't mean to come across as being against acquisition. I think it's vital. It's more just think about the kind of customers you're acquiring. I could acquire a ton of customers for any business, right? It's easy. 50% off your first sale.
Right.
Done. You've got a bunch of customers now, but they all suck. So,
Right.
I think paying attention to the quality of the customer who comes through is pretty important.
Fantastic. Well, Drew, I know we only scratched the surface on this topic, and you have a ton more wisdom and insight to share. So talk a little bit about nerd marketing. Love the title.
Nice.
What are you trying to accomplish with, what are you trying to accomplish with nerd marketing, and who should go check it out?
I talk about customer analytics a lot, and it's kind of a heady subject, and people don't like it. They don't like pulling out spreadsheets and thinking through this stuff, but I love it because it's like tested ways to grow your business. It works. And
it works.
The goal with nerd marketing is to make it easier to understand for any business owner. So like there are really heady books out there on Amazon all about customer data analytics, and none of them they'll put you to sleep. So the goal with the blog is to try to make it a little bit more digestible. And
Yes.
I just launched a podcast, I think you mentioned, where it's just me talking about this stuff 5 to 10 minutes a week. The goal is to give you like one actionable step every week to grow your business. So that's nerdmarketing.com.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I will say that it is very digestible. They're fun reads. I get your newsletter. It's also a fun read, a great subject line. It's entertaining. Yeah, if you're not careful, analytics can be absolutely mind-numbingly boring. But the way you put this stuff together is fantastic. So everybody check it out, nerdmarketing.com. Yeah, absolutely. And then how can they follow you on Twitter as well? Because I know you're pretty active there.
I'm on just drewsanocki.com, Sanocki. It's my last name.
At Drew Sanocki. Fantastic. Yep. Well, Drew, this has been a ton of fun. We'll have to do it again sometime. Really appreciate it. And we'll talk soon. So for everybody else, we'd love to hear your feedback on this interview, other topics you want to find out about. And so until next time, stay classy.